The best supported theory of our universe's origin centers on an event known as the Big Bang. The Big Bang theory remains to be the top prevailing cosmological model for the early development of the universe. It has been the mainstream scientific view. Georges Lemaitre first suggested the Big Bang theory in 1920s, when he theorized that the universe began from a single primordial atom. Cosmic microwave background is a faint glow of light that fills the universe, falling on Earth from every direction with nearly uniform intensity. Here are the top concepts. It is fantastically large. The proportion of the universe visible today is a sphere nearly 15 billion light years in radius, and that we believe is just the tip of the iceberg. Light travels at a fixed speed. The Big Bang model also asserts that the seconds after the explosion, the surroundings were at high temperature of about 10 billion degrees Fahrenheit, with aggregates of fundamental particles such as neutrons, electrons, and protons. Next is the test of the Big Bang. It is supported by a number of important observations. The expansion of the universe, the observation that galaxies are receding from us, the abundance of the light elements, hydrogen, helium, and lithium. These elements were fused from the protons and neutrons in the first few minutes after the Big Bang. Let's proceed to the early universe. Planck era. These first 10 to 43 seconds after the Big Bang, this is called the era of quantum gravity. So, when quantum effects and gravitational effects were important on the same size scale, there were no separate forces. At the end of this era, the gravitational force freezes out from all the others become separate. The GATT era, or the Grand Unified Theory era. Here, the strong nuclear force, the weak nuclear force, and electromagnetism are all unified. The quark era. During this era, all the elements particles were in equilibrium with radiation. The lepton era is about 1 second after the Big Bang. Note, this is the equivalent of the era of recombination for protons to come much later, so there should be a cosmic neutrino background all around us, those same neutrinos from when the universe was 1 second old. No one has proposed a way to detect them. Epochs in cosmic history. The evolution of the universe in a single graph. So, look at these graphics. Notice on the bottom right the transformation from fundamental particles to atoms and finally to galaxies and stars. Meanwhile, the mysterious dark energy has been increasing in importance. The next major era occurs when protons no longer are able to ionize atoms as soon as they form. This allows the formation of hydrogen and helium atoms to form, taking out the free electrons. This era of recombination, about a million years after the Big Bang, frees the photons because their former interactions with electrons no longer occur. Next is the era of nucleosynthesis. So, the first atomic nucleus to be formed is hydrogen, as it is just a proton, so it was there from the very early time when particles as massive as protons were created. Much later, a few minutes after the Big Bang, the average temperature of the universe fell to the billion degrees, and for a short time, temperatures were right for nuclear fusion. Next, the birth of the four fundamental forces. The four fundamental forces are as follows: strong nuclear, electromagnetic, weak nuclear, and gravitational. So first, what is the electromagnetic force? Electromagnetic force is weaker than the strong nuclear force. It acts over a much longer distance range from the strong nuclear force. Next is the gravitational force. Gravitational force is always attracted. Weakest of all fundamental forces but acts over very long distances. Gravitational force is very important in explaining the structure of the universe. Next, what is a strong nuclear force? It holds positively charged nucleus together extremely short range. Strong force 100 times EM and weak forces 1039 times gravity. It holds nuclei of atoms together. Next, what is the weak nuclear? It is responsible for nuclear decay. Weak and has a very short distance range. Let's proceed to the insurgence of light. Here are the properties of light. Light travels in straight lines. Light travels much faster than the sound. Light travels very fast. Light travels in waves. Light can create shadows. Now let's proceed to the characteristics of light. As you can see in the graphics, it states that we see things because they reflect light into our eyes. Light waves are like other kinds of waves. They have crest, troughs, wavelength, frequency, and speed. However, light waves are electromagnetic. Electromagnetic radiation. Light is a form of energy called electromagnetic radiation. It comes from the sun and other sources. It travels at the speed of light and mostly invisible. Sa type of mirrors, convex mirrors are mirrors that curve outward. It is used for security purposes in cars and etc. They also allow us to see a wide view. Now let's proceed to cosmic dark ages and the ages of stars. The sizes of stars. Stars differs in size and masses. An example of medium-sized star is the Sun. Stars that are smaller than the Sun comes in two main categories, the dwarfs and neutron stars. There are two types of giant stars, the red giant stars and the blue giant stars. So the red giant stars leaves a core of nearly pure helium surrounded by a shell through which hydrogen fusion works its way outward in the star. The blue giant stars are hot and much more massive than our Sun. The life cycle of stars. A star, regardless of its size, begins its life inside a huge cloud of gas called nebula. The Orion Nebula was the birthplace of these protostars. A star is born when temperature and pressure at its center becomes great enough to start nuclear fusion. With no more energy flowing outward, nothing prevents gravity from crushing the matter in the core together. When hydrogen fusion stops, the core glows brightly and is called a white dwarf. The question is, when did life begin? We cannot pinpoint time but can narrow down a time period with three lines of evidence. Evidence and metamorphic rocks that life existed 3.85 billion years ago. Rocks before 4 billion years old are rare and hard to find. Time of heavy bombardment ended about 3.8 to 4.0 billion years ago. Evidence suggests life as long as 3.85 billion years ago and definitely at 3.5 billion years ago. Life rose and dominated the planet between 100 to 500. The DNA is used as living fossil. The simplest organisms today and those dated 3.5 billion years ago are remarkably advanced. The assumptions are life began under chemical conditions of early Earth, and life did not migrate to Earth. Miller-Urey experiment. First flask, partially filled with water and heated to produce water vapor. Next, water vapor was moved to a second flask where methane and ammonia vapor was added. Electric sparks in second flask was very source of chemical reactions. Below second flask, water vapor cooled and recycled to first flask. The result, it turned brown with amino acids and other complex organic. The following are the variations of Miller-Urey experiment. Different mixes of gases to represent atmosphere. Different energy sources like UV. The results, it all produced amino acids and complex organic molecules, not as much as the original experiment. Organic molecules are building blocks of life. Now let's talk about the differences between DNA and RNA. DNA is double-stranded, while RNA is an obvious candidate and more simpler than DNA. On Earth, short strands of RNA-like molecules were produced spontaneously, partially or completely. RNA-like molecules that could replicate faster with less errors soon dominated populations. Other inorganic minerals may have also had similar role. Early cell-like structures, advantages to enclosing enzymes with RNA molecules. Lab experiments suggest that membrane structures existed on early Earth. Non-living pre-cells have lifelike behavior. It grows in size until unstable, then split to form a daughter cell. It selectively allows other types of molecules to pass in or out of membrane. Also, it stores energy in the form of electric voltage. Organic molecules come in left and right-handed forms. Non-biological processes have no preference. Biological processes do have a preference. If both left and right-handed RNA develop, why did one die out?